There is a thought experiment that Friedrich Nietzsche considered the heaviest thought a human being could hold. Imagine that your life, every moment of it, every joy and every failure, every relationship and every loss, every decision you made well and every one you made badly, is going to repeat. Not once, infinitely. Exactly as it happened, with no changes, no corrections, no second chances, the same life, over and over, forever. Would you be able to say yes to that? Nietzsche called this the eternal recurrence, and he used it as a test, not of the afterlife or of cosmic mechanics, but of how you are living right now, whether the life you are living is one you could love completely, including the parts that hurt, including the parts you would change if you could. His answer to that test, the orientation he considered the highest possible human achievement, was two Latin words: Amor Fati, love of fate. Tonight we look at what that actually means, and why it might be the most demanding and the most liberating idea in the history of philosophy. The first thing to understand about Amor Fati is what it is not. It is not resignation. It is not the passive shrug of someone who has decided that nothing can be changed, so nothing is worth trying for. It is not the quiet despair of a person who has stopped caring. It is not stoic endurance, gritting your teeth and getting through it. Those are all forms of tolerance. Amor Fati is not tolerance. It is something categorically different and considerably more demanding. Nietzsche was explicit about this distinction. He wrote that his formula for greatness in a human being was Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Not merely to bear what is necessary, still less to conceal it, but to love it. Love, not endure, not accept. Love. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, had arrived at something adjacent to this idea centuries before Nietzsche. Their framework distinguished between what is within your control and what is not. External events, other people's behavior, illness, loss, death. These lie outside your control. Your response to them lies within it. The Stoic path was to focus exclusively on what you can control and practice indifference toward what you cannot. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly in his private journals. The daily practice of accepting what comes without resistance, of recognizing that the obstacle is not separate from the path, but part of it. That the thing blocking you is the thing that develops you. Nietzsche knew the Stoics. He read them deeply, and he thought their framework, while admirable, stopped short of something essential. Acceptance, even graceful acceptance, still positions what happens to you as something external that must be dealt with, something that arrives from outside and must be integrated. The Stoic relationship to difficulty is ultimately one of management, skilled, dignified, even beautiful management, but management nonetheless. Amor Fati refuses that distance entirely. It does not manage difficulty. It does not integrate it. It claims it. It says, this suffering, this failure, this loss is not something that happened to me. It is something that is me. It is part of the fabric of what I am. And I would not remove it even if I could, because removing it would remove the person I became because of it. This is where the idea becomes genuinely uncomfortable to sit with, because most of us have things we would remove if we could. Losses that feel purely subtractive. Failures that seem to have produced nothing but damage. Pain that appears to have served no purpose beyond its own existence. Nietzsche is not denying that these things hurt. He is not claiming that suffering is secretly good or that pain is secretly pleasant. He is making a different and more precise argument. He is arguing that the self you are right now, the specific texture of your intelligence, your sensitivity, your capacity for depth, your understanding of what matters, was shaped by everything that happened to you, including the worst of it, especially the worst of it. The person who has never lost anything significant tends to have a particular quality, a kind of untested brightness that is genuinely pleasant but sits at the surface of things. The person who has been through genuine difficulty and come out the other side has access to depths that the untested person simply does not have. Not because suffering is valuable in itself, because the navigation of suffering, the slow, difficult, often ugly process of finding your way through something that seemed unsurvivable, develops something in you that nothing else does. Nietzsche's own life is worth looking at here, because the philosophy was not theoretical for him. He was in physical pain for most of his adult life. The migraines, the vision problems, the isolation, we covered this in the Will to Power episode. What is worth adding here is that Nietzsche wrote Amor Fati from inside that experience, not from a position of health and comfort, looking down at suffering as a concept, from the inside of it, finding a way to not just endure it, but to claim it as his. He wrote once that he had turned every no into a yes, that the very conditions that most people would have used to justify stopping, the pain, the loneliness, the lack of recognition during his lifetime, became for him the material of his philosophy. The resistance was the fuel, the suffering was the content. This is not a performance of positivity. It is something harder and more honest than that. It is the recognition that the alternative, spending your life in resistance to what has already happened, in grief for what cannot be changed, in the exhausting, futile project of wishing your past were different, costs more than it saves. Think about the things in your own life that you most wish had gone differently. The relationship that ended badly, the opportunity that slipped away, the failure that still stings when you remember it, the loss that reshaped everything around it. Now think about who you would be without those things. Not a better version of you, a different one. Someone who had not been shaped by those specific experiences into the specific person you are. Someone whose understanding of love or failure or loss or resilience came from somewhere else, or didn't come at all. Amor Fati does not ask you to be grateful for pain. It asks you to recognize that the self you are standing in right now, with all its depth and its damage and its particular understanding of things, is inseparable from everything that formed it. That you cannot surgically remove the suffering without removing the self that the suffering helped build. And then it asks whether, understanding that, you might be able to say yes to the whole thing. The practical question, the one that philosophy always eventually has to answer, is what Amor Fati looks like in the actual texture of a life. Not as an abstract position, but as an orientation that changes how you move through your days. It does not mean passivity in the face of things that can be changed. Nietzsche was not teaching surrender. If something in your life is wrong and within your power to change, the Amor Fati response is to change it, with full commitment, without complaint, without the energy-draining background narrative of why this shouldn't be necessary. The distinction is between resistance to what has already happened and engagement with what is happening now. The past is fixed. Every moment of resistance to what has already occurred is a moment of energy spent on something that cannot be altered. Amor Fati frees that energy by removing the resistance entirely, not through willpower or forced positivity, but through the genuine recognition that what happened was part of what made you. In practice, it looks like this. You fail at something significant. The conventional response moves through several stages: denial, self-criticism, the search for external causes, the gradual acceptance, the slow recovery. Each stage involves a sustained resistance to the reality of what happened. The failure is treated as an interruption, something that should not have occurred, that needs to be processed and moved past before real life can resume. The Amor Fati response does not eliminate the pain of failure. It changes the relationship to it. The failure is not an interruption. It is an event that is now part of your story, fully, permanently, and without apology. The question is not how to get back to where you were before it happened. The question is what this failure makes possible that would not have been possible without it. What it shows you about yourself. What it opens that was previously closed. This is not toxic positivity. It is not the insistence that everything happens for a reason or that pain is secretly a gift. It is something more rigorous than that. The refusal to spend your finite attention and energy on resistance to what cannot be undone, redirected toward what actually can be done with what you now have. Marcus Aurelius expressed this from the Stoic direction. He wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way. Nietzsche takes that insight and pushes it further. Not just that obstacles advance you, that you should love them, that the orientation of love toward your entire fate, including its darkest passages, is the only orientation from which a fully lived life is possible. Because the alternative, the life spent in partial resistance to itself, in negotiation with what has already happened, in the perpetual background wish that things had been different, is a life that never fully arrives. A life held at arm's length from itself. Go back to the thought experiment at the beginning. Your life, exactly as it has been, repeating forever. The question Nietzsche is really asking is not whether you would choose that cosmically. It is whether you are living in a way that you could choose it. Whether the life you are building right now, the decisions you are making, the things you are allowing yourself to want, the person you are becoming, is one that you could say a full and genuine yes to. Not a resigned yes. Not a yes that comes from having no other option. A yes that comes from having looked at the whole thing, the beauty and the damage, the achievements and the failures, the love and the loss, and found that you would not trade any of it, because all of it, together, is the only possible version of you. Amor Fati, love of fate. Not the easiest idea in philosophy. Nietzsche never claimed it was. He called it his highest formula for greatness, which tells you something about how hard he understood it to be, and how much he thought it was worth reaching for.